What do you want? So you're just having trouble with this? Now, again, to me personally, I wouldn't even look at questions 24 through 29. I would just come over here and put all the angles in. Does everybody agree with that? All right, I don't care about answering them. You should know all of them. All right, now, one of the most important things I show kids is, does everybody agree this is 90 degrees down here? So that means 1 and 28 have to add up to what? 90. All right, so just get right into the habit of saying 90 minus 28 is, that was 62. If this is 90, that's 90. So that means angle 2 is what? 39. All right, now this angle right here is 51. So that means angle 3 had to be 26. How did I know that? Because angle 51 is an exterior angle. You with me on that? All right. Yes. Well, I'm almost there. All right. Now, number 4, angle 4. All right. I want everybody to look at that and say that's 55 degrees. Now, how did I know that? Because I want you to look at this big triangle right here. This is a right triangle. Is everybody with me on that? Does everybody see that? Since I can't draw very good today. Right. Did everybody see this right here? Andrew, you got that? All right, now if angle 4 is 55, that makes angle 6 what? 35, right? And because this is 35, that makes this 55. That's it. That's all there is to it. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Go. Let's take a look at 37. Oh, this is a nice one. All right, so right off the bat, I'm looking at this going angle 2 must be 20 degrees, right? Because this whole thing is 180, right? All right, now I have 110, so angle 5 must be 110. Angle 7 must be 70. You with me? Now, this is what I don't like about this book, all right? Well, there are many things, but this thing in particular. If you're not careful, people miss what? Those two things are equal. Did you see that? Right. So that means these two angles are 50, correct? So 180 minus 50 is 130, which means 130 divided by 2 is 65. So that means that angle right there is 65 and that angle right there is 65. You see what I'm saying? No, come on. I don't want you to think about it. I want you to know this is an isosceles triangle, correct? Do you see that black outlined triangle, right? Do you agree this angle right here is 50? You mean the angles of a triangle add up to 180, right? 180 minus 50 is 130. These two angles are equal, right? So 130 divided by 2. You happy now, right? So now once we know those are 65, do you agree everything else is just elementary, right? Because 2 of the 3 angles are known, right? So it's just add them up, subtract from 180. So I'm trying to tell some of you guys, you need to look at what I'm telling you. Most people can't do this problem because they didn't recognize that angle 8 and angle 1 are what? Equal, right? So that's why I think it's annoying. All right, you have to be real careful with what angles are equal. Agreed? All right, come on, guys. Somebody else. Go. 39. The measure of the larger acute angle in a right triangle is 2 degrees less than 3 times the measure of the. So what do the two angles add up to? Right. So let's draw a right triangle. And honestly, this is exactly how I want you to do it. We're drawing a right triangle. This is 90. One angle is completely unknown. Do you agree? The other one is 2 degrees less than 3 times. 3x minus 2. Right? Wow. Look, come on now. You see what I'm saying? That's easy for you. 4x minus 2 equals 90. That wasn't bad, right? Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else?
33.
33. Good for you, buddy. 33. The landscape is forming an isosceles triangle. Angle A to be 3 times the measure of B and C. So that means this has to be X and this has to be 3X. The key was understanding isosceles, right? Yeah, I know, right? You have to read carefully. And that's generally what the problem is. All right, you just miss something in the words, right? Isosceles, right? Anybody have any questions with that? Anybody? So that would just be what? 5x equals 180, x equals, I think, 36. So the angles are 36, 36, and 108, I believe. Anybody else have any questions on this homework? Nobody? Now remember, guys, I'm not having 2 days of review. That's why I'm saying you can't not just like do things halfway now. All right, we're having 1 day of review. All right. What? 30. Come on now. The angles add up to 180, right? 2x plus 3x plus 4x equals 180. Simple as that. All right, let me put things on pause. All right, really simple. Okay, congruent triangles. Triangles are congruent if all of their parts are congruent. What are their parts? The 3 sides are congruent to the 3 corresponding sides, and the 3 angles are congruent to the 3 what? Corresponding angles. Every year I say it's so obvious, and then I ask someone what corresponding means, and they just look at me like I'm crazy. All right, so listen, I'm not going to make that mistake this year. I'm looking right here. Angle A corresponds to what angle? R. Come on now, and this is what I'm talking about, paying attention. To me, it seems obvious, but it's always not obvious to several kids. So if you can't answer my question, speak up. Angle B corresponds to angle what? Angle C corresponds to? All right, now, AB corresponds to what? Not SR. AB does not correspond to SR. It seems like it should, correct? Because, in fact, the measures are equal, correct? But we're talking specifically about the triangle. So what am I saying? From A to B, I went from 1 tick mark to 2 tick marks. So everybody agree with that? So I have to go from 1 tick mark to 2 tick marks. So if you put AB corresponds to SR, you are wrong. All right. There's a few little details you got to be careful of. All right. So now I'm going to ask you why or what corresponds to CA, TR, and what corresponds to BC, ST. All right. You have now proven those triangles are congruent. Why do we know those triangles are congruent? Because all the corresponding parts are what? Congruent. That's all there is to it. That's all there is. If you're going to prove triangles are congruent, or for that matter, any polynomial congruent to another polynomial, you have to prove all the sides are congruent and all the angles are congruent. And not just the sides congruent, but you technically have to say the corresponding angles are congruent and the corresponding sides are congruent. Is everybody with me on that? All right, I promise you it's really that easy. Even the proofs are super easy. All right. So now that I feel like you understand that, all right, I did a great job on that explanation. So let's look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 real quick. All right, before we go into the proofs. Show that the polygons are congruent by using rigid motions and by identifying all congruent corresponding parts, then write a congruent statement. Okay, so rigid motion just means this. All right, and we can't really prove that unless you're working on an iPad. So here's what I'm trying to show you. I'm trying to draw this right here. iPad's not working, sorry. Let me try it one more time. There we go. All right, here's what they mean by rigid motion, right? I'm just sliding this over. And now you can see it's what? Exactly the same. You with me on that? All right, but that's not really how you do it. So I don't really care about the rigid motion. I will never ask you anything about rigid motion. All right, but that's just what rigid motion means. It just maintains its shape as it's being moved. All right, so with that being said, all right, are those two triangles congruent? Are these two triangles congruent? Yeah. Yes. All right, because how many parts are there? 6. Do I feel like making you write all 6 parts congruent? No, I don't feel like doing that. All right, so you need to ask yourself, do I understand what the crazy guy is saying? All right, I don't want to make you write all that out because I think it's silly, right? And you're supposed to do it, guess how many times? 6 times. All right, I don't know why. All right, that's why I almost skipped this section. All right, everybody should be able to look at that and say angle A is congruent to angle what? Angle B is congruent to angle C is congruent to angle AC is congruent to, AB is congruent to, and BC is congruent to. Therefore, the triangles are. And now the congruent statement, that's the only thing I care about. The congruent statement says this. Triangle. I'm trying to draw it with my iPad here. Triangle A, B, C is congruent to triangle. All right, someone help me. What? J, K, L. Wow, that was hard and exhausting. You guys okay? You need a break? Yeah, that's what I thought. Some of you, I believe, you need a break. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at number 2, just to make sure. All right, they're trying to trick you. All right. So first of all, are those two triangles congruent? Because all the sides are, the corresponding sides are what? And the corresponding angles are congruent, right? Therefore, they are congruent. Now, the hard part on this one is you have to label them properly. All right, you have to write the congruent statement. Now, I like to write the first one in alphabetical order. So I see the 3 letters A, B, and C. So I'm going to write those in alphabetical order. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say triangle A, B, C must be congruent. Now, angle A has how many tick marks? 1. So that corresponds to triangle D. Thank you very much. And then B has how many tick marks? How many does B have? What are we talking about? All right. So I understand what you guys are confused on. That's my fault. I'm talking about triangle ABC. So I'm asking you about angle B in triangle ABC. How many tick marks does it have? 2. So that has to correspond to the angle with 2 tick marks, which is what? C. And then the only one left is what again? B. Notice how B is not with B here. That's where kids make a mistake, and that's the one that's probably on the test. All right, because kids always think that angle B has to correspond to angle B. Is that true? No, we just showed it's not. Because angle B can be made up of several angles. All right, now come on, this is what I'm talking about. You have to concentrate. All right, I'm trying to show you where all the little mistakes are made. All right, now let's just say on the test, I wanted you to list all 6 congruent angles or all 6 congruent parts. Sorry, all 6 congruent parts. I would never, ever use the figure. I would not use the figure. Does everybody hear me? I would use the what? The congruent statement. Because the congruent statement is not going to mislead your eyes. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Right? Because you might make a mistake and say BC corresponds to BC. Does BC correspond to BC? No, it doesn't. It should, correct? But the triangle has been twisted. Does everybody see that? And that's why I didn't skip this section, because I skipped it last year and then people got all confused. All right. So I need to make sure everybody understands what I'm saying. Always list out the congruent parts from the congruent statement. All right, let me say that one more time. Always list out the congruent parts from the congruent statement. Is everybody happy with that? So now if you had to, if I was forcing you to write out now the congruent parts, you would say angle A is congruent to angle. This is where you guys step in. Angle A is congruent to angle D. Angle B is congruent to angle, and C is congruent to. Now you have to do the three sides. You would say AB is congruent to, BC is congruent to, and AC is congruent to. Yes. Is everybody understanding me? All right. And like I said, I normally skip this, but it's been a failure. So I want to make sure I don't miss anything with you guys. All right. That's how you list the corresponding parts. Everybody's good with that? Simple, simple, simple. All right. Let's go down here. Questions 7 and 8. Suppose triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. All right, so now on your paper, how can I solve for X? What's true, guys? I need some help. Tell me.
Could you like 65 equals 2y?
Now, does A correspond to D?
The equation of this.
Yes, you're exactly right. That's what I'm hoping you tell me. A corresponds to D. So here was a variable, correct? So I need to figure out what the measure of that angle is. So the measure of that angle corresponds to angle what? A. So all we do is we say 2y minus 5 equals 65. So 2y equals what? So of course, y is just 35. Is everybody happy with that? And so now I just come over here and say, what? Yeah, just, I don't need to make a system of equations, right? I can just say that EF is 2x plus what? 2x plus 35. Now, come on now, don't just look at it and say, okay, yeah, he's doing a good job again. All right, you participate, make sure you understand what I'm saying. Does everybody understand what I did with that 35? I replaced it with what? The y value. All right. Now, how do I figure out what X is? Somebody said 2x plus 35 equals what?
90.6.
How do I know that?
BC is congruent to EF.
What is it?
BC is congruent to EF.
Right. So look, here's how I did it. EF is what I'm missing, correct? So if I'm missing EF, I go over here and say, okay, here's EF. What's it congruent to? BC. And then I go find what BC is. And BC is what? 90.6. All right. So let's solve that out for me. So 2x is equal to, what is that? Is that right so far? Everybody's good? And so we can just say X is equal to, is it 22 or 27? 27 point, yeah, 27.8. Practicing your mental math. Don't just write down my answer, you didn't know it was 27.8, you should try to figure it out yourself. All right. I just don't think that's that hard. Right? Is everybody good with that? All right. Now here's where we have to prove the triangles are congruent. All right. Now, in our assignments, all right, I need everybody to understand this statement. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, we're going to use that a lot. And so we say what? That's going to be called CPCTC. All right. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's what we've been saying. All right, I just didn't tell you that. All right, so everybody needs to underline that. I'm going to be saying CPCTC, and you have to understand. All right, to me, I got all the way through the test last year and asked somebody what it meant. They were clueless. All right, I don't understand. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That just makes sense to me, so I don't even have to ask you a question about it. And some of you are looking at me like, I don't even know what you mean corresponding. What are you talking about? So I'm going to say it one more time. When I say triangles are congruent, automatically then what's true?
Corresponding points are congruent.
Thank you. That is 100% correct. When I tell you triangles are congruent, then they're what? Corresponding parts are congruent. We don't say their angles are congruent, right? Because not all angles are congruent. Their corresponding angles are congruent and their corresponding sides are congruent. All right. So if I'm looking at, well, this triangle right here, if I told you that BCD is congruent to BAD, then what is in fact true? What's true? Their parts are congruent. Who said that? Thank you. So if their parts are congruent, now tell me what parts are congruent. Angle what? Well, you wouldn't say it like that. You would say BDA is congruent to BDC. You would say CBD is congruent to ABD. And you would say angle A is congruent to angle C. You would say BC is congruent to BA, AD is congruent to CD, and BD is congruent to itself. That's what's meant, all right? We're going to tell you triangles are congruent, and once we tell you they're congruent, then you're safe to say all of their what? All of their parts are congruent, all right? And how do you know their parts are congruent? From this right here, CPCTC. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, I agree. That was exciting. All right. Now, one other thing, guys. What do you think is true if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle? The third angle is congruent. Right. Now, let's just make logical sense out of that. All right. So let's come back to this right here. And can somebody tell me what, if those triangles are congruent, can someone tell me what's true about CDB and ADB? Besides the fact they're congruent? They're how many degrees? 90 degrees, right? Everybody needs to know that. If two angles are congruent and they form a linear pair, they must be right angles. That was kind of obvious, right? So those both angles are what? 90. Now, if I come over here and say this guy right here is 50 and this guy right here is 50, the other angle is what? 40. So this is what the third angle theorem is stating. If this is congruent to this and this is congruent to this, then automatically what? The other two angles are congruent. It's called the third angle theorem. Now, again, no one had to ever tell me that. Right? No one had to tell me that. That's just, to me, so obvious. Why would I need a theorem for that? Right? If the angles add up to 180 degrees and I know two angles, then I'm automatically going to know the what? The third angle. Right? Is everybody okay with that? All right. That's why this chapter is just obvious. All right. But it's obvious for about 80%. All right. I'd like it to be 100%. All right. So now with that, let's get back to the task at hand. All right. So write a 2-column proof. We're trying to prove that the triangles are congruent. So how do I prove the triangles are congruent? I must demonstrate that what? All the sides are congruent. All the angles. Now, instead of saying all the sides and all the angles, I would prefer you add one more word in there. All of the, right. Better word than parts. All of the, say it. All of the what parts? All the corresponding parts. Does everybody understand that? All right, we need the corresponding parts to be congruent. All right, does everybody agree? Just because this is a 50-degree angle and this is a 50-degree angle doesn't mean the triangles are automatically congruent, correct? All right, so here we go. Let's look at it. All right, let's see if we can do this now. Cut that out. So, wow, they're giving me, I don't know what this is. Oh, I think what I did was I copied this and I forgot to delete this. So I don't think that's really supposed to be there. Does everybody see that? Is that on your paper? Or did I delete it? Oh, maybe that's true. Maybe they left it out and I put it in there. All right, but whatever. All right, here we go. Let's look at it just to see. So they told me that AB is congruent to CB, correct? So now I come over to my figure and I mark AB congruent to CB. Then I mark AD congruent to CD. Now notice I'm using different tick marks, correct? And now angle BAD, this angle over here, is congruent to BCD, which is this angle right here. Everybody good with that? And now it says BD bisects angle ABC. So what in the world does that mean? If BD bisects ABC, what is true?
It's perpendicular.
Not exactly. Tell me.
Um,
Go ahead, Tanner, quick.
so like the two angles that are right next to the.
I want you to tell me what those two angles you're referring to. Don't just tell me two angles.
BDC.
You are right.
BDA are congruent.
Oh, but you said BDA, right? BD.
Oh, AD.
Say it again now. Come on, I want you to get it right.
ADB is congruent to CDB.
All right. So this is my fault. Look right here, guys. Underline BD bisects ABC. And I don't, like I said, this is confusing. I don't know why. All right. So BD bisects ABC. So what is true? Tell me. What? Yes, there. That's what we want. All right. That's what we want. All right. So this was one tick mark here, one tick mark here. These two angles have what? Two tick marks. Okay. So now are those triangles, can we say those triangles are congruent? Not yet, but the first part is what? Is all what? Given. Now remember, in order to prove triangles are congruent, all three angles and all three sides have to be congruent. So right now, how many parts do I have congruent? 4. Thank you. I need to prove 2 more. All right, so what's true? Why is BD congruent to BD? Very good, guys. Yeah, the reflexive property. All right, you are equal to yourself. That's called the reflexive property. So BD is shared by both triangles. Does everybody agree with that? So now I mark 3 tick marks. I don't know why I didn't put all that in here. It says angle BAD is congruent to BCD. That's also what? Yeah, that's also given. Angle ABD is congruent to CBD. Somebody tell me why that is. No, we already marked it congruent, but why were we able to mark it congruent? That's exactly right, guys. I just don't understand. Definition of bisect. Thank you so much. That's exactly right. As soon as we heard bisect, we knew it cut it in half. Now, why is BDA, the last angle, congruent to angle BDC? Can someone tell me? Third angle theorem. That's correct. The third angle theorem. It just says if 2 angles of a triangle are congruent to 2 angles of another triangle, then the third angle must be congruent. Now, here's a little something a little bit awkward. So the triangles are now congruent because that's the definition of congruent triangles. All right. If the triangles are congruent, or if the parts are congruent, then the triangles are what? Congruent. All right. Is everybody happy with that? That's not bad. All right. So let's see if we can knock out this next 2 proofs. All right. So let me see if I can do this. Oh, of course not. Oh, I can just do this then. All right, here we go, guys. Let's do this next one. All right. Okay. Now, let's try this. All right, let's mark the figure. Angle A is congruent to angle C. Angle D is congruent to angle B. AD is congruent to CB. AE is congruent to CE. And AC bisects BD. So if AC bisects BD, somebody tell me what's true. AC, yes, very smart. Thank you. DE is congruent to EB. Okay, so now what's true about angle AED and BEC? What's true? They're congruent. Why? You could say third angle theorem, but you could also say they are what? What else? They're what? Yeah, vertical angle theorem. Thank you. You got two choices there. Say vertical angles, or you can say third angle theorem. Right? Everybody's good with that? Anybody have any questions? All right. So, step one, write out the given. So all of that goes for statement one, and then it's given. All right, now the only other two things I said, Oliver, what else is true? You said it already.
AED equals
Right. You say angle AED is congruent to what angle?
BEC.
Yes. All right. Now we come over here, we mark 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And that was a vertical angle theorem. Or for those of you guys who want, or you could say that's the third angle theorem. All right, what was the other statement now? Somebody? Tell me, Sebastian. No, not yet. Because we marked it on the figure. Listen, we marked it on the figure, Sebastian, but we didn't write it down. So what do we have to write? DE is congruent to BE. I'm good with that. And that's what? No. Why is DE congruent to BE? Yeah, definition of bisect, right? Definition of bisect. Everybody good with that? And now, step 4. Now we can say what? Yes, this triangle triangle AED is congruent to triangle CEB. And that's just definition of congruent triangles. Anybody have any problems with that? Anybody? I forget, what time's the bell ring, guys? I don't know. Anybody know what time the bell rings today? 41. All right, thank you. So you have 1 minute. All right, the only thing I'm asking you to do is please just knock out the last proof there. All right, knock out the last proof. You got a minute or two. If you want to knock it out so you don't have any homework, that's great. All right, hopefully you understand what I was talking about today.